billion. But when, in the aftermath of the banking crisis, we decided that this one-size-fits-all of consolidation needed to change. And we introduced what we called international banks, national banks, regional banks, and specialized institutions who were able to treat Islamic finance as specialized banks and set different capital requirements for national and regional banks. So they could have a regional license for 5 billion, which is almost where they were, and a national license for 10 billion. And I remember sitting with Dr. Mutallab, because at that time they wanted me to approve that the interest accumulated on the deposit should be used as their capital. And I told them I cannot approve the capital of an Islamic bank to be interest when you claim to be a non-interest bank. So there was this interesting meeting in Kaduna with the board of Jais, where they had only 4 billion naira. They needed 1, and they didn't know where to get it. And so I picked up the phone and called one of the richest Nigerians I know. And I said, you know, I've read in Forbes Africa that you are one of Africa's richest men. And he said yes. And I said, and yet in Nigeria we can't have an Islamic bank because we can't get 1 billion naira. So anyway, at the end of that conversation, he wrote a check for 1 billion. And the application was submitted. And then every week I would say, where is the Jais license? And I'd be told that they hadn't complied. But I was told the issue was capital. I remember going to the president for a meeting, and I met the president of Kano, who had gone to report me to say that I had reduced capital for an Islamic bank from 25 to 5. I made sure that before I gave Jais that 5 billion, that I had given Wema Bank a license with 10 billion naira capital. So it was not just an Islamic bank that I had given an exception. So I escaped that way. Well, but the license didn't come out. And I remember, I think Dr. Mutala would remember, one day I got tired and I called a meeting. I went to the deputy governor, the directors, the board of Jais, and I said, let's all sit in the central bank. And Mr. Bintube was then the MD. He had complained bitterly about how he had done everything and his license was not out. So we had the meeting. I said, okay, what do you need from the central bank side? And they had the list. And Bintube brought out evidence they had given everything that was needed, including acknowledgement from the central bank. So at the end of that meeting, I said, Director, is there any other thing outstanding from Jais? And he said no. So I turned to the deputy governor and said, I want to sign the license for Jais by close of business today. And that's how we signed that license at 5 p.m. on that day. The point I'm making is that there are a number of people who don't understand things, and they fight things because they don't understand them. You know, some people, when they don't understand something, instead of trying to understand it, you destroy it. And it's extremely important for people who know that what they're doing is good for the country, good for the society, to stand firm and fight. Because you can't just put up your arms. If we had caved in at that time with all the noise about Islamization, there was a threat to suicide. There was a court case that would have succeeded. Because the regulations, which, as Dr. Osman said, had started even before I became a governor, the regulations issued for Islamic finance started by defining non-interest banking as banking carried out in compliance with the Sharia. Now, legally, since the law setting up the Bofia law allowed for non-interest banking, central bank could not restrict non-interest banking to Islamic finance. And a challenge in court at that time would have basically led to a cancellation of the regulations and opened the door for Jais not to be licensed. So there was a meeting organized by Kan lawyers in Lagos, and they compiled the legal evidence, and they were going to file a case on Monday against the central bank, against those regulations as unconstitutional because central bank was legislating. Well, one of the lawyers in the meeting was like me, a King's College old boy. So after the meeting, he called me and said, "You're in trouble." So I said, "Well, this is what's happening. We're going to challenge this regulation." So I said, "Okay, fine. So you were part of the meeting, you were part of the strategy. How do I get out of this?" And he said, "You have to change the regulation." So I said, "All you have to do is say that there are two types of non-interest banking, one that complies with Sharia and other types of non-interest banking." So I said, "Draft it for me." So he drafted the opening part of the regulation. We approved it and issued it on Friday. They had invited us to a debate on a Saturday, not knowing that we knew they were going to court. So I sent my deputy governor, and they came with these same arguments for, preparing the grounds for going to court the next day. And the deputy governor, we then had front page of this day, new regulation, said, "Oh, sorry, this has changed yesterday." So it's, there are a lot of intrigues, and you'll be surprised at the names of the kinds of lawyers who were going to go to court to challenge. These are people that are supposed to be highly exposed people, highly cosmopolitan people, and you'll be shocked at how narrow-minded people can be when it comes to these issues. But, the good thing is, after some time, people realized that there was no harm intended, that this thing is good. You have a diversification, you have financial inclusion. They walk down Oxford Street and they see Islamic Bank of Britain, they see David Cameron talking about Sukuk, and then they begin to feel a bit maybe ashamed of themselves and begin to pipe down a little and then wait for the next battle. But the key is